Hi guys, in this episode of Shri series, we're going to continue from right angle trigonometry, but in this case, we're going to be calculating your angles. All right. Now, if you've been looking at the previous videos, we were calculating the sides using the trig ratios, SOHCAHTOA. However, in this situation, we have two questions, A and B, and we need to calculate your angle. All right, so how do we work that out? Provided that you've got your lengths, how do you work out the angles? All right, so before I proceed any further, like I said in the previous videos, it's good to know your trig ratios, which is SOHCAHTOA. And for those who are not too sure, if you could refer to my previous lessons, you can see what SOHCAHTOA means. All right, so when you're working out right angle trigonometry, obviously you need to remember the angle has to be at 90 degrees, and you can notice that you've got the square sign there that will tell you that your angles are 90 degrees. All right, next is to know your trig ratios. Now you all should be familiar with SOHCAHTOA. All right, so that technically is your Bible in order for you to understand the ratios for trigonometry. All right, what does SOHCAHTOA mean? So sine is opposite over hypotenuse, cosine is adjacent over hypotenuse, and tangent is opposite over adjacent. All right, and if you know these trig ratios off the top of your heart, the chances you're able to get this really well, you're able to understand it, and you're a bit more able to confidently solve this. All right, I know a lot of students just say, look, I'm just gonna write this on my cheat sheet and then refer to it, but I would say the more you practice, you'll remember it. It'll be as simple as 1, 2, 3. All right, so let's get deep into the question. So I'm just going to rub this out. So if you look at question A, all right, what we've got is we've got two lengths there. All right, now the first thing we need to do is we've got to identify the length in the sense that is that opposite, is that adjacent, is that hypotenuse. All right, and then use the approximate ratio. Okay, so let's look at what's been given. We've got 3 and we've got 8, and we're told to find this angle x. All right, so we need to identify which one's opposite, which one's adjacent, and which one's your hypotenuse. All right, now if you look at 8, I think 8's the easiest to find because that's your hypotenuse. That's the longest side of a right angle triangle. And if you look at 3, is that opposite or adjacent? So first thing you need to find out is that is opposite to this angle in question, which is x. So therefore 3 becomes your opposite. So which ratio has opposite of a hypotenuse? It's sine. So what we need to do is, like I've said before, you need to write down the formula. So sine theta is O over H. All right, and we now need to substitute O and H. So in place of O, we're going to put 3, and in place of H, we're going to put 8. So what does your equation now become? That becomes sine theta equals 3 over 8. All right, now if you look at your previous videos, we needed to find your length. In this case, like I said, we need to find your angle. Now, in order for you to do that, you have to be very familiar with what we refer to as your inverse function in your calculator. And I'll just write that down so you're very aware of that. This is called your inverse. And your inverse function has a -1 sign there. All right? So when you look at your calculator and you see sine inverse, it's actually a shift button that you use to get your angle. All right, so always look at your inverse function in order for you to understand that. So sine theta is 3 over 8, so therefore theta is 3 divided by 8. So what you need to do is get your calculator and go 3 divided by 8, which is 0.75. So what you got to do is you go sine inverse 0.375. all right, so what we did was we got 3 divided by 8 and we got 3.75, and then what you need to do is press your shift and sine inverse. So when you press your shift and sine, what that becomes is your sine inverse function. So you put shift and sine, and your angle therefore becomes 22 degrees. So therefore your theta is now 22 degrees. All right. So that's really how you work out your angles. It's exactly the same formula that we use. We substitute your opposite and your adjacent, and then you divide and you get 0.375. And then next, what you need to do is find your sine inverse. All right. Why are we using sine? Because 3 is my opposite and h is my hypotenuse, and that is your SOHCAHTOA. So sine is opposite over hypotenuse. Okay. Now let's look at B. We need to work out what x is. So what is 10 and what is 6? Now if I look at 10, 10 is my hypotenuse because that's the longest side. What is 6? Is 6 my opposite or my adjacent? If it's opposite, it'll have to be opposite this angle here. All right. But in this case, that 6 is your adjacent. So we've been given adjacent and hypotenuse. So what trig ratio do we use? Do we use sine? Do we use cosine? Or do we use tangent? We use cosine. All right. So what happens is we go cos theta is equal to adjacent over hypotenuse. And then what you do is you substitute cos theta. What's my adjacent? My adjacent is 6 divided by 10, which is 0.6. And theta becomes cos inverse 0.6. All right. So what we've done here is we've written down the formula. Cos A or cos theta is adjacent over hypotenuse. In place of A, I've put 6. In place of H, I've put 10. 6 divided by 10 is 0.6. And in this case, we just need to put shift cos. And that shift cos becomes your inverse, which is that -1 to the power -1. And then you put cos 0.6. And what do we get there? And that is going to be 53 degrees. So in this case, my angle becomes 53 degrees. All right. And if I'm not too sure, I can clarify. So what I do there is I go 6 divided by 10 and then cos inverse, and that is cos 0.6, and that is 53 degrees. Now you got to remember that I'm solving these questions with the help of a calculator. All right. Because at the top of my mind or head, I don't understand what is the sine inverse of 0.6. So it's really important that you thoroughly know your trig ratios. All right. So just summary, all you need to do is identify the lengths. Is that opposite or hypotenuse? If it's opposite hypotenuse, it becomes sine. In B, it's adjacent over hypotenuse and we use cos. And then what we do is we use a ratio. The only trick is you need to be familiar with what we refer to as your inverse function in your calculator. All right. So when we get sine theta is 3/8, we need to get theta. So that's sine inverse 3 divided by 8, which is 0.375. In some calculators, you could literally enter that function and get the answer is 22. In B, we had cos, and what we did was we got theta is equal to cos inverse 0.6. And that answer is 53. All right. In the next set of videos, we're going to be talking about more questions involving angles, and in this case, use tan. All right. Thanks for listening, guys. Bye now.